I'm still not quite back 100%, still under the weather a little bit from the last trip. And I thought I'd make a quick video in the garage this time talking about how I maintain the trailer and how easy it is to maintain the Mission Overland Summit trailer. One of the big things that's commonly overlooked when looking at trailers, whether it's on-road or off-road trailers, is how are they to maintain? Is it easy to maintain? How's the upkeep with it? In this video, I'm going to quickly cover how I do post-trip resets as well as routine maintenance on the trailer. Even if you're not mechanically inclined, these things are very easy to maintain. With a little bit of time and some basic tools, you can keep your Mission Overland Summit trailer up in tip-top shape, ready for the next adventure. While we're diving into the maintenance practices I do on my trailer, keep in mind this is how I maintain my trailer. You can maintain yours how you want to. Just some tips and tricks that I use maybe can help you out on your stuff as well. The first thing we cover is post-trip maintenance. I just got back from a trip last weekend, and while the weather was nice for 2 of the days, the third morning woke up when we're leaving, it was pouring rain. So everything was soaking wet. It's really important to get everything dried out after a trip, especially if it was rainy like it was on my last trip. So the first thing I do when I get back is I open everything up. I open the windows on both sides, I open the back door, I open the top, and I dry things off. I also have a dehumidifier in my garage. It helps suck all the moisture out and keep everything nice and dry to prevent any kind of mold or mildew buildup in the trailer. While everything's opened up in a trailer, I do a once over on everything. I clean everything up, I vacuum it out, I wash the sheets, I empty out the pantry for any food that might go bad, so you don't want to leave a lot of stuff in there because that's also how you get bugs and rodents in your trailer if you just leave things around in there. So while going through everything, I make sure everything's still where it belongs, everything's still nice and snug and tight. And I just do a quick visual inspection of everything. I check the wheels, I check to make sure nothing's loose, nothing got rattled loose on the last trip. It only takes a few minutes to do it. And also, I empty the fridge out, I unplug the fridge, and I leave it open so it can air dry, and also clean it out. Make sure everything's nice and clean in there. Other than that, there's not a whole lot else you gotta do to do a reset. And of course, after everything gets washed up and cleaned, I put everything back in the trailer and get it packed up, ready to go for the next trip. While it's not like a go bag, but it's nice to have everything ready to go, so when you do want to go for your next trip, everything's kind of ready to go. Just gotta fill your tanks, load some food up, hook it up to the Jeep, and I'm out of here. Makes it very simple. Now I'm going to cover some maintenance tips. One of the things I didn't realize when I purchased this trailer is how easy it was to maintain. My last trailer was a tribe trailer, and it had very traditional hubs and spindles for the wheels, where you had to take it apart, pull the hub apart, pull the bearings out, repack it, put it back together. It was very intensive and it took quite a bit of time. Not very hard, but it's not a fun thing to do, and it takes quite a bit of time to do. With the Timberin 3500 HD axles on this, remember these are it's axle-less, so you have a spindle on each side, but there's nothing connecting between. They actually have everything set up where you don't have to take everything apart to maintain these. I was surprised how easy it was to maintain it. So, all you really need is a flathead screwdriver and a grease gun. There's a greaser on the spindle where you can put grease right into your bearings, keep everything nice and lubricated. On the suspension arm, there's also a greaser there to keep everything nice and greased up. So let me show you where everything's at. The Mission Overland Summit uses the Timberin 3500 axle-less suspension, right? So it's independent suspension on both sides. It's actually quite easy. There we go, now you can see everything. It's actually quite easy to maintain these. Previously, you'd have to pop off the cap, pull the tire off, pull the spindle out, pull the bearing out, clean everything up, repack the bearing with grease, put it all back together, and you'd have to do this like about once a year, about every 4,000 to 5,000 miles, give or take. With Timberin seems to have put some thought into this, and Mission Overland, thank you for using such a great axle system. There's a dust cap on here. This black cap right here, you just take a flathead screwdriver, and you can take this cap, and it just pops right off. You take the little dust cap off. It's really easy to take off. You don't have to put a lot of force onto it. It's super easy to do. There's a grease zerk inside here. You pop your grease gun in there, pop a little grease in there. It's recommended you lift the wheel off the ground a little bit, and you can use your jacks that are built into it because the jacks on these guys actually can maintain the weight of the trailer. You could actually use the jacks to lift the whole trailer up to do maintenance on it, change a tire, or in this case, to get it off the ground enough where you can rotate it. As you're slowly rotating it, you put grease in there until you see a little bit pop out. At that point, you know that the bearing has been fully greased and you're ready to go. And to complete it, all you gotta do is take your little dust cap, and just push it back on. Just like that. And now you're ready to go for the next 4,000 to 5,000 miles. According to the Tembrin website, you're supposed to do it like once a year or every 4,000 to 5,000 miles, give or take like that. So I do it I just check all this stuff out before every trip. Not the short trips, but if I'm going across country, I'm going to make sure everything is greased up and ready to go. All right, the next part, it's also super easy to maintain, is the suspension arms themselves. So these are kind of like a trailing arm. They attach in the front and they hang out in the back, and that's where the spindle is actually attached to the bottom, and they pivot on the front. In the front, there's actually a hole in there where you can put a grease gun in there. I'll show where that is right now. All right, so here's the view from the bottom of the trailer, and you can see here's the bump stop on the front. This would be towards the front of the trailer, and if you come right down behind it, there's a hole right here. Inside that hole is where the grease fitting is located. You pop your grease gun in there, pop a few rounds in so you see the grease popping out the side just a little bit. But at least here you can make sure you have grease on both sides. Now, I'm only showing you one side because the other side of the trailer is super tight against the wall, but you're just going to repeat the same steps on the other side of the trailer. And that's all it takes to grease up your suspension and your hubs, or your spindles, on the Mission Overland Summit. Super easy, don't need anything fancy, don't need any specialty tools, and it only takes a few minutes and you're ready to go for the next 4,000 to 5,000 miles. The next quick maintenance thing is your leveling jacks. Your leveling jacks also have grease zerks on them, and you need to make sure they're greased up and they're going to be fully ready to go on your next trip. Right below the handle on the leveling jacks on the back of the trailer, you'll find a grease fitting here. Hook up your grease gun, load some in there. As you're loading it in, as you're greasing this, put like 2 pumps of grease in, and then you want to rotate your jack in both directions as much as you can, and then add another pump or 2 in there to make sure it's nice and greased up. Now, I check the grease in the jacks every time before I go. Only takes a second. And since the ones in the back sit behind the back tires, if you're driving through rain or mud or anything, all that moisture and dirt and debris is getting kicked right up into the jack. So I think it's extra important just to keep some extra grease in these guys. It doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't get a big mess everywhere, and it keeps your jacks functioning for a long time ahead. Even though I changed up my jack to the Arc 2, it has a grease joint. The stock one has a grease joint too. Same thing as the back. Put some grease in there, move it up and down, get it worked in, and you're ready to go. While we're here at the tongue of the trailer, the max coupler also has a grease joint. This is the part that can rotate 360 degrees around. You'll find a grease fitting right here. Now this one doesn't take much grease. I would say put a pump or 2 in there, and on the bottom side you can see where the grease starts coming out. If you put too much in, it just basically ejects all your grease right onto the floor. It's a big mess. So less is more on this one, and it should spin freely and nice and loose. The last greasable joint you're going to find is actually on the receiver that plugs into your tow vehicle. A couple things to look for here. The first thing is your grease joint is on the inside. It's inside here. And you want to make sure it's greased a little bit, but you don't have to over grease it, just want enough. The last thing you got to check for with this, and this one's kind of an important one, is there any play in this fitting right here? If there is, you want to have it snug, but you want it to spin freely but not too loose, because if you have a lot of play in here, it'll wear out the bushings a lot faster on this guy. It is a bit of a pain in the butt to tighten up because you have to tighten it from here and the top, but other than that, it's not too bad. It only takes a couple seconds, and it doesn't loosen up much after it gets broken in. After every trip, I always drain my water tanks. It's a good idea not to leave water in there, because water that sits in a tank for any period of time can go bad. It'll get smelly, it can cause mold and mildew, and generally it's not safe to consume the water or even wash your dishes with it if it's been sitting in the tank for any period of time. So after every trip I drain my tank. Now there's a couple ways you can drain the tank. One, you can drain it outside, let it drain out, but my driveway is at a rather steep incline, and with the drain plug being in the back, it leaves several gallons of water still in the tank. So I had to come up with a solution to be able to flush my tanks and also drain my tank while being in the garage without having to use buckets. What I found is I made myself a little hose adapter for it, so I can hook a hose or a garden hose up to the water tank. So I have a 3/8 to 1/2 residential faucet hose, and I 3D printed a adapter going from 1/2 to a regular garden hose adapter. So I can basically screw a garden hose into it. I hook this up to the trailer, hook this end up to a garden hose, run it out of the garage, and I can now flush my tanks without having to take the trailer out of the garage. Now, once a year I do go through and I sanitize my tank. I'll leave a link for what I use down below too. I basically put 1 ounce or so of that into a full tank of water. I jiggle it around a little bit and I flush it out several times. And with that, my water tank is always nice and clean. Even though I don't drink the water out of the tank, it is nice and clean. It doesn't smell weird when you're taking a shower with the water, and it keeps your tanks in pristine shape. To keep my batteries ready for the next adventure, I keep my trailer plugged into shore power while it's resting in the garage. Here I'm using a 30 amp to a 20 amp dongle, and with this, it keeps my lithium iron phosphate batteries topped off nice and neat. I did change up my power converter from the WFCO Auto Detect to a Progressive Dynamics, and I'll link the video somewhere up here. You can see how I did that and why I did it. While keeping a trailer plugged into shore power, it ensures that your batteries will be fully topped off, ready to go, and in good health. Lastly, it's also important to check your lug nut torque. On the Mission Overland Summit and the timber and axles, the recommended value is 90 foot-pounds. Just go through and do a once over and make sure all your lug nuts are on nice and snug. Again, a lot of these little things only take a couple seconds to do, but can save you a lot of issues down the road just by doing very simple maintenance. These are just a few of the things I do to maintain my trailer. A little bit of time here and there can save a lot of time and money down the road and keep everything operating in tip-top shape. Let me know what kind of stuff you do on your trailer to keep it ready to go for the next adventure down in the comments below. I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.